30 for 30 podcasts are brought to you by OnStar. If you're ever faced with something as terrible as vehicle theft, OnStar can help. OnStar has the power of stolen vehicle slowdown. It's a feature that enables an advisor to work with law enforcement to get your stolen ride back, slowing down your vehicle enough so that authorities have a chance to apprehend the crook who took it. Get OnStar on your team today. OnStar is available on Chevrolet, Buick, GMC, and Cadillac. OnStar, be safe out there. Requires select paid plan, cell reception, GPS signal, and working electrical system. Doesn't prevent theft, damage, or loss. Details at OnStar.com. From ESPN Films and ESPN Audio, you're listening to 30 for 30 podcasts. From the moment it first debuted in 1988, John Madden Football has pushed the technical limits of what a video game can do. Now simply referred to as Madden, it's become one of the most popular titles in the history of video gaming, and it's had a big impact on the game of football itself. But despite its current-day success, the game has had its challenges along the way and almost didn't make it to market. This week, how John Madden went from football player and coach to the heart of a billion-dollar franchise. Here's actor and video game fan Will Wheaton telling the story of Madden's Game.
Steelers are leading 13-12, late stages, third quarter, with a 3rd and 9 at their own 2. Then it's back. He fires down the field, and it's caught on a dead run. That is Juju Smith-Schuster. Pittsburgh Steelers touchdown. 98 yards to the rookie Juju.
We got Juju right here, too, so hang on.
When 20-year-old Juju Smith-Schuster stepped to the mic for a post-game press conference,
Juju, where'd you get all that speed?
a different kind of game was on his mind.
I don't know, to be honest, the reason why I kept looking back, because of, in Madden, my speed is like 82, 83. So I was like, I think they're going to catch me. And then next thing you know, I pulled away.
What should your speed be in Madden?
I mean, after today, hopefully, it'll get boosted up.
Today, Madden is one of the most popular video games in the world. It's referenced in press conferences and by TV announcers.
Those aren't real numbers. He's playing Madden.
Yes, those are Madden numbers.
And on NFL sidelines.
That boy got a Madden control in them cleats, don't he? That boy got a Madden control in them cleats, don't he?
But Madden is more than just a name on the cover.
Hey, you want big-time football? The hits, the boom, the doink, the whap. It's all here. This is my game.
To tell the story of this huge video game franchise, we need to tell the story of its namesake, John Madden. John is in his 80s now.
Yeah.
And it's kind of poetic that the legacy of this Hall of Fame coach lives on in a game.
I remember my dad used to tell me, my dad was a mechanic, and he worked hard. And, I used to, say, I got to get a job, I got to make some money. He said, no. He said, don't work. He said, just play. He said, there'll be a time when you have to go to work, and when you have to go to work, you'll work the rest of your life, so don't start it too soon. And my dad would be proud to know that I never started it.
It turned out the game of football was all John ever needed. But his playing career as an offensive lineman ended with a knee injury during training camp of his rookie year with the Philadelphia Eagles.
It tore everything, and in those days, once they operated on that, they just operated on it so you could walk again. I mean, there's no such thing as coming back. And I had to go in every morning for therapy, and Norm Van Brocklin was a quarterback. And he would be sitting there by himself watching game film. So I'd just go sit in the back and just watch the film. He was always looking for things he would do, and he would talk those things. One day, Norm Van Brocklin said to me, he called me Red, he said, Red, come on up here and sit up here and watch it.
What was the defense, Red?
And that's where I first learned football. I learned him from one of the great quarterbacks of all time.
John got into coaching and rose quickly from assistant coach to head coach of the Oakland Raiders at just 32 years old.
Hey, you jerk! You big jerk! Yeah, you! Don't get excited, John. Relax.
For the next 10 years, John Madden made his mark as one of the most colorful coaches of the 1970s.
You don't even watch your time. You sit back there and just throw it.
Rampaging up and down the Raiders' sideline.
Never called one on them.
But more than anything, what he did was just win, baby. Often in unforgettable fashion.
Impossible dream of a play.
But year after year, the Raiders lost in the playoffs.
I mean, that was our but. The Raiders are a good team, but they haven't won a Super Bowl.
In 1976, though, they finally made it to the Super Bowl.
Going to the Super Bowl. What is that? What is that?
Madden's Raiders dominated the Vikings to win Super Bowl 11.
There it is. There's the gun. John Madden goes on the shoulders of his players.
It was the greatest feeling in the world. I mean, there was nothing that can beat it.
John Madden's grin is from ear to ear. He looks like a slick watermelon.
John, how's it feel?
Great. Waited a long time for it.
Let's clear the field.
I've been here 10 years as a head coach, and those 10 years have been the happiest years of my life.
But just 2 years after winning the Super Bowl, John Madden retired from coaching.
I gave it everything I had, and I don't have any more. I'm not resigning, I'm not quitting, I'm not doing anything. I'm retiring from football coaching, and I'm never going to coach again. I was only 42 years old, and I thought, I was going to spend time with my family and do all these things, and, that was kind of overrated. I mean, everyone, had their own thing to do, and, I was sitting around with the dog. So I went back and did the television, and then that kind of took its place.
It's the perfect place for it.
I mean, I went from playing to coaching to broadcasting, and I got that same feeling.
Twist there and pivot, and boom, the ball's there right again between the 8 and the 9. Oh, is he happy? What a throw.
John was forging a new career in television, giving fans an insider's perspective on the game. Among his viewers was a young fan named Trip Hawkins, who, as a teenager, had tried to invent a game about the sport he loved.
Since I was a football player myself, the kind of game that I most wanted to make was a football simulation game. Football is really, frankly, just a modern warfare game. And it's all about capturing all the territory. When you capture all the territory, you get points for it.
He modeled his idea after tabletop games, using things like
paper, cards, numbers, dice, charts. You might compare it to something like Dungeons and Dragons.
But even then, he knew this paper and dice game wasn't what he really wanted.
Very quickly, I could tell that I wanted to play this with other people, and yet a lot of other kids didn't want to do it. They wanted to go watch TV. And then I heard about computers.
Tripp studied computers and game theory at Harvard University. In 1982, he left a marketing position at Apple to start a video game company called Electronic Arts.
In the very beginning, with Electronic Arts, the technology was quite limited. We had 8-bit computers that had very little drawing power, very little memory, hardly anything. And in the beginning, I thought, football, 22 guys running around the field, that's going to be too hard. And I invented a game called Dr. J and Larry Bird Go One-on-One. And then as soon as that was a success, I said, okay, great, on to football.
By the early 80s,
That's a great play down on the bootleg.
John Madden was establishing himself as the ultimate guide to football for millions of fans.
He should square it off, give the quarterback his numbers.
But what made him successful wasn't just his insight or even his coaching resume.
John Madden was like an incredibly knowledgeable friend who was sitting next to you on your sofa, sharing a beverage and discussing the game with you.
Now watch right here. Boom. That is a great stiff arm.
That relatability drew in his audience, including David Hill, who would go on to become the president of Fox Sports.
John was like that best friend sitting there, and he wanted you to know that at Lambeau Field, by God, it was cold.
weather's going to be cold.
But what makes it better is the smoke that's coming in, and they're barbecuing the brats.
They always got big old brats.
I had one.
I had one, too. I had a brat for breakfast.
You got to be part of it. I mean, you can't be in an enclosed environment and do a football game. If it's cold and snowing or raining, you open the windows and let it come in. I mean, so you know what the heck it is. And not only do we have to be out in the elements, I know this probably sounds crazy, but we have to be standing up. You can't be sitting down. I never sat down at a football game in my life.
John was a natural teacher, whether describing fans in parking lots or drawing plays on a screen.
Now watch, right here, boom!
He was always trying to better inform you as a listener.
Most people don't really understand sports. They want to understand sports. And John loved educating the public in the game.
See that move he gave on Irvin?
John would tell you why.
Before you go to the post, you give a corner move.
Every time that you listened to a John Madden call, you were getting a PhD in football.
When I started on the football project, I said, I need some help with football. I want to have an expert mentor advisor. So maybe I can go find a coach that would do this for a fee. But I thought, if I'm going to be paying a royalty on a football game, then I want the biggest name I can get. And it wasn't that hard to figure out that it was John Madden.
In 1984, Tripp contacted John, who agreed to a meeting. But John had developed a fear of flying, so they met in an unconventional setting. His personal assistant at the time was Sandy Montag.
I first met him when I was 22 years old, and, we traveled the country by train. Take 72 hours on Amtrak to go coast to coast, and imagine doing that without a cell phone. So you spent a lot of time playing cards, drinking Miller Lite. It defined who he was as a travels with Charlie sort of guy, John Steinbeck, seen the country.
And so the arrangement was I'm going to fly into Denver and get on the train with him, and then we're going to spend 2 days on the train coming out to the West Coast, and we're going to sit around all day and talk football. And we get to the train station, and we meet him, and we get on board, and we get into the dining car, and we found out that John was such a famous customer of Amtrak at that time that even though the dining car was basically closed except for mealtime, they just let him use it all day long if he wanted.
I'm not saying they are, but they would be capable of it.
So we sat in the dining car. I brought my lead programmer and my producer along, but I was pretty much leading the design of the game.
So Tripp told me that he'd gone to Harvard and had his own major, computer games. So I figured any guy that could go to Harvard, get in Harvard, talk them into letting him make up his own major, and that major be games. This isn't just an average deal here. There had to be something special to this guy.
John had this cigar that was about a foot long and about like the bottom half of a baseball bat, and he never lit it, but he played with it. And we had a captive audience with him, and so in preparation for this meeting, I had produced a huge document and a long list of questions for John.
The first thing that I talked about is that I wanted as a teaching tool. Show them different people, different formations, motion, movement. Because when I got out of coaching, I taught some classes at the University of California in Berkeley, extension classes on football for fans. Because the one thing that you can take advantage of, and I mean, it can be a game that you can use to coach and to teach football, and you could put in a play and then play it against a defense and then see how it works and make adjustments on it.
I was aware of some of the technology limitations of the machines of the day, so I found myself at least wanted to ask the question about what did he think about a skeleton level game where it's just 7-on-7. And he just immediately said, well, that's not real football.
I wanted 11 guys on each team.
John said, well, I'm not putting my name on that game until you figure out a way to make it realistic.
Because every game Before that, they kind of had 3 guys on a team, 5 guys. And I said, if we're going to do it, we have to have 11. And we have to have linemen. Because